Welcome back to the Quick Quiz channel. Today we have an interesting fact quiz about presidents of the United States. Hope you enjoy the quiz and please subscribe for more content. Who was the oldest president elected to office? Joe Biden, who was elected at the age of 78 in 2020. Who was the first president to be born a U.S. citizen? Martin Van Buren. Which president authorized the creation of NASA? Dwight D. Eisenhower. Who was the first president to be impeached twice? Donald Trump, in 2019 and 2021. Who was the first president to have a telephone in the White House? Rutherford B. Hayes, in 1879. Who was the first president of the United States? George Washington. Who was the tallest president in American history? Abraham Lincoln, standing at 6 feet 4 inches, 193 centimeters tall. Who was the shortest president in American history? James Madison, who stood at 5 feet 4 inches, 163 centimeters tall. Which president served the longest in office? Franklin D. Roosevelt, serving for 4 terms from 1933 to 1945. Which president served the shortest term in office? William Henry Harrison, who served for only 32 days in 1841 before passing away. Who was the first president to be impeached? Andrew Johnson, in 1868. Who was the first president to be assassinated? Abraham Lincoln, in 1865. Which president introduced the New Deal to combat the Great Depression? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Who was the first president to have electricity in the White House? Benjamin Harrison, in 1891. Who was the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms? Grover Cleveland, serving as the 22nd and 24th president. Who was the first president to be born in the United States? Martin Van Buren, born in 1782. Who was the first president to appear on television? Franklin D. Roosevelt, in 1939. Which president signed the Emancipation Proclamation? Abraham Lincoln, in 1862. Who was the only president to resign from office? Richard Nixon, in 1974. Which president oversaw the construction of the Panama Canal? Theodore Roosevelt. Who was the only president unanimously elected by the Electoral College? George Washington. Who was the first president to visit China? Richard Nixon, in 1972. Which president served as the commander-in-chief during World War II? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Which president was known as the Great Communicator? Ronald Reagan. Who was the first African American president of the United States? Barack Obama, serving from 2009 to 2017. Who was the first president to win a Nobel Peace Prize? Theodore Roosevelt, in 1906. Which president was a former actor? Ronald Reagan, who had a career in Hollywood before entering politics. Who was the first president to be born in the 20th century? John F. Kennedy, born in 1917. Which president was a Rhodes Scholar and earned a degree from Oxford University? Bill Clinton. Who was the first president to be inaugurated in Washington, D.C.? Thomas Jefferson, in 1801. Which president signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law? Lyndon B. Johnson. Who was the first president to appear on a postage stamp? George Washington, in 1847. Which president was known as the father of the Constitution? James Madison, for his contributions to drafting the U.S. Constitution. Who was the first president to have a pet dog in the White House? George Washington. Who was the first president to fly in an airplane? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Which president signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965 into law? Lyndon B. Johnson. Who was the first president to ride in a car? William McKinley. Who was the first president to be awarded the Medal of Honor? Theodore Roosevelt, for his leadership during the Spanish-American War. Which president established the Peace Corps? John F. Kennedy, in 1961. Who was the first president to have a Secret Service detail? Theodore Roosevelt. Which president signed the landmark Americans with Disabilities Act into law? George H. W. Bush. Which president implemented the New Frontier program? John F. Kennedy. Who was the first president to be awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature? Woodrow Wilson, in 1919. Which president signed the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote? Woodrow Wilson. Who was the first president to be born in Texas? Dwight D. Eisenhower. Which president authorized the Manhattan Project to develop atomic weapons? Franklin D. Roosevelt. Which president signed the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA? Bill Clinton. Who was the first president to be elected after the adoption of the 22nd Amendment, which limited presidential terms? Dwight D. Eisenhower. Who was the first president to travel in a submarine? Theodore Roosevelt. Thank you for taking part in our interesting fact quiz about presidents of the United States. Hope you enjoy the quiz and please subscribe for more content.